The tale we are about to tell is not for the faint of heart. It's a story of a vicious and unrelenting polar bear attack, one of the most brutal in the annals of history. But it's not just the victim who suffered in this tragedy. His innocent children had to bear witness to the gruesome spectacle, their young minds forever scarred by the horror they beheld. So, dear audience, if you have the courage to brave this chilling account, hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the polar bear attack on Aaron Gibbons, and it will send shivers down your spine. Polar bears, as we all know, are the apex predators of the Arctic, feared and respected by all who dwell in their realm. This is true because polar bears are not just powerful and cunning predators, they're also ferociously hungry. The number of polar bear attacks worldwide has been steadily increasing, as these magnificent creatures are forced to leave their melting habitats in search of sustenance. It's a grim reality, one that puts humans and bears on a collision course that can only end in tragedy. In the remote, frigid region of Nunavut, the air is crisp and the snow is deep. But there's more to contend with than just the cold, the locals have learned. As sea ice continues to recede, the polar bears' feeding patterns were disrupted. They became desperate and began to wander further inland, searching for prey. The hunters in the region knew this and understood the risk involved in venturing out. But Aaron Gibbons, like many before him, never imagined the price he would pay for providing for his family. Aaron was a devoted father, always putting his 3 children first. Despite the harsh conditions, he regularly used his hunting expertise to provide meat for those in need. However, despite locals' knowledge of polar bears and their tendency to avoid these creatures, the apex predator could not be entirely controlled. For 18 years, the area had enjoyed a truce between humans and bears. Indigenous people understood that the animals must be left alone, and the bears reciprocated the respect. But, as with any wild creature, the chance of conflict could never be ruled out. As a result, patrols were deployed on the outskirts of town to keep the bears at bay and shield the inhabitants. Although some minor confrontations arose, the relationship between people and animals remained balanced, and the community functioned in relative harmony. But on a summer day in July of 2018, tragedy struck the tight-knit community of Arviat, a small town with a population of less than 2,500 people. The people in this remote settlement knew each other's stories, heartaches, and joys, but nothing could have prepared them for the news that would shake them to their core. The news spread like wildfire, and the once thriving village became paralyzed with shock and grief. Earlier that day, Aaron took his children out on his boat for a fishing trip. As the boat cut through the frigid Arctic waters, Aaron looked on proudly as his children reveled the splendor of the landscape before them. Century Island loomed in the distance, a breathtaking sight with its rugged cliffs and shimmering waters. Aaron's heart swelled with joy as he watched his children cast their lines and reel in their first catch of the day. This was what life was all about, he thought, passing on the knowledge and traditions of his people to the next generation. Little did he know that the tranquility of this idyllic scene was about to be shattered by a predator that lurked in the periphery, waiting for the right moment to strike. The bear's arrival brought a sudden halt to the idyllic scene. Aaron Gibbons, a skilled hunter who had faced many dangers in his life, felt a sudden cold sweat run down his back. His instincts told him that this was not a normal bear. This was a predator driven by desperation by the ravages of climate change, and it was fixated on his children. The bear's haggard appearance belied its strength, and it was clear it was not going to leave without a fight. Aaron was torn between his fierce protective instincts for his children and his knowledge that attacking a polar bear was a death sentence. But as he looked into his children's eyes, he knew there was no other choice. With a steady hand, he instructed his daughter to call for help on the radio, and throw rocks at the bear to buy time. But as he turned to face the animal, it became clear that this was a battle he couldn't win. The polar bear had caught sight of Aaron and it had locked eyes on him with deadly intent. Desperate and unarmed, Aaron made the fateful decision to turn his back on the beast and run towards the boat. His daughter could hear the thudding of the bear's paws as it gained ground on him, and she knew that her father's bravery was his only chance. Despite his skill as a hunter, Aaron was no match for the raw power of the polar bear. The animal seized him in its jaws, crushing his neck and tossing his body around like a rag doll. The bear's ferocity was breathtaking, and it was clear that this was not just an animal driven by hunger. This was a predator driven to madness by the unforgiving landscape it called home. As the bear devoured Aaron's body, his children huddled in the boat, terrified and alone. They listened as their father's screams were silenced by the sound of crunching bones and tearing flesh. It was a nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. When the emergency team arrived, they found the children still in shock, clinging to each other for comfort. The polar bear had been killed, but it was too late for Aaron. His bravery had saved his children, but it had cost him his life. In the weeks that followed, the community mourned the loss of one of their own. The tragedy had underscored the dangers of living in a land where the most majestic creatures could also be the most deadly. But for Aaron's children, the memory of their father's courage would endure, a beacon of hope and inspiration that would guide them through even the darkest of times. In 2017, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service estimated that there were only 20 fatalities due to polar bear attacks between 1870 and 2014. However, this number is likely an underestimation. The majority of these attacks, which are predominantly committed by young male polar bears suffering from hunger, occur between July and December, when sea ice is at its lowest. While the specific reason for this polar bear attack cannot be confirmed without further investigation, it is possible that the bear was acting out of hunger or in defense of its territory. Regardless of the motive behind the attack, the memory of Gibbons would live on as a symbol of courage and sacrifice, a reminder that in the face of danger, there are those who will stop at nothing to protect the ones they love. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Let us never forget the lessons learned from this tragedy, and always be prepared for the unpredictable dangers of the wilderness. Should you wish to stay informed of other similar stories, please do not hesitate to subscribe to our channel. Until next time, farewell.